In the quiet heart of Maple Woods, a weary veteran named Noah Turner returned home after years away from the world. He came with nothing but his loyal German Shepherd Rex and the memory of the grandmother who once raised him beneath these same trees. But when he stepped into her old treehouse, something stirred beneath the floorboards. A hidden key, a letter she left behind, and a secret she protected in silence for more than 30 years. Why did she keep it hidden? And what truth in this forest was worth her silence and her life? This is a story of courage, of loyalty, and of one man who discovered that the greatest treasure is not gold, but faith and love strong enough to heal an entire town. Before we begin, tell me where you are watching. Drop your country in the comments below and subscribe. The air in Maple Woods was still and weightless, neither bright nor dim. The sky holding a soft gray tone between dusk and morning. The forest stretched endlessly, quiet yet breathing, as if the trees remembered every secret whispered beneath their leaves. Noah Turner walked slowly along the narrow dirt path, his boots sinking slightly into the soft ground layered with pine needles. At 35, he carried himself with the controlled posture of someone trained to move through danger without noise. His brown hair was cut short, streaked lightly at the temples, though he was not yet old. A faint scar crossed his left cheek, a thin reminder from the years he rarely spoke of. His eyes, deep blue and reflective, held the quiet watchfulness of a man who had seen too much and learned to speak little. Across his shoulders hung a weathered canvas bag and a folded tarp, and at his side walked Rex, a German shepherd with a thick sable coat and a steady gait. Rex was 6 years old, tall, muscular, and alert, his ears always tilted slightly forward. The dog's amber eyes seemed to carry human understanding, and his loyalty was silent but constant. During the worst nights overseas, when the distant echoes of mortars still haunted Noah's sleep, it was Rex's presence that kept the world from collapsing into noise. The two shared a rhythm, built from survival and quiet companionship. As Noah reached the ridge, the forest opened into a small clearing. Before him stood the old treehouse, his grandmother's legacy. It rose from the heart of an ancient oak, its wooden beams darkened by time, its rope ladder swaying gently with the wind. Moss crept along the lower planks, and vines curled around the posts like patient hands reclaiming what was once human. For a long while Noah stood still, his breath shallow, eyes tracing every familiar angle. The structure seemed smaller than he remembered, yet it carried the same weight of belonging. He had received the letter 2 months earlier, the official notice that Eleanor Turner had passed away and left him her property. He had not returned to Maple Woods in more than 15 years. The war had taken him elsewhere, through deserts and ruined towns, through places where people vanished faster than memories could hold them. Coming back felt strange, like stepping into a story that had paused without him. Noah placed his hand on the trunk of the oak. The bark was rough, cold, and steady under his palm. He thought of Eleanor, his grandmother, a woman of quiet strength and deep patience. In his childhood, she had been the center of everything gentle in the world. She was small and wiry, her hair white since before he could remember, her hands always smelling faintly of cedar and tea. She rarely raised her voice, but when she spoke, even the forest seemed to listen. It was she who taught him how to read the sky, how to tell when the forest was safe or when it was warning. Rex barked softly, the sound low and familiar. Noah smiled faintly and climbed the first rung of the ladder. It creaked beneath his weight, but it held firm. Inside, the treehouse smelled of old pine and dust. Sunlight filtered weakly through a cracked window, painting the floor with muted patterns. The air was cool and heavy, carrying the faint scent of dried leaves. Noah crouched down and brushed his hand over the floorboards, clearing a patch of dust. Beneath his fingers, he could feel faint carvings, the initials he had once etched there as a boy. He sat for a long while in silence. The stillness of the place pressed on him, not with fear, but with memory. Each sound, the creak of the boards, the sigh of branches outside, felt like a piece of the past moving just out of sight. He remembered climbing these ladders barefoot, Eleanor calling him from below, her voice echoing through the trees. He remembered the nights when he would sit by the small window, watching fireflies drift like lost stars. And he remembered the last time he left this forest, angry, young, determined to find something beyond the stillness, something that would make sense of who he was. Now standing in the same place, that certainty felt distant. The war had carved into him a quiet no peace could easily fill. There were faces that stayed with him. A friend named Carter who never made it home. A captain who spoke of redemption and died before seeing it. The sound of distant thunder still found him in sleep, though no storm existed. And through all of it, Rex had been his constant, the single thread pulling him back toward light. Rex paced the small room, sniffing at corners, occasionally glancing back at Noah as if to confirm that the man was truly here, not just passing through another battle. Noah reached out and rested a hand on the dog's back. The warmth of that touch anchored him. He unpacked a few belongings, a canteen, a folded shirt, a tin of coffee grounds. The small things made the space feel less like a relic and more like a home. As he worked, his mind wandered to the question he had been avoiding since reading Eleanor's will. Why had she left him this place? He had cousins closer, neighbors who had helped her for years. Yet the house was his. The thought unsettled him because it carried the unspoken weight of expectation. Outside, the forest stirred. A light breeze rustled through the branches, carrying the faint sound of water flowing deeper in the woods. Rex's ears twitched, but he did not bark. The forest was peaceful, but beneath that peace, Noah sensed something else. A hum, subtle and low, like a song too old to remember. He looked out the small window and saw how the light shifted across the canopy. The air was neither warm nor cold, neither inviting nor hostile. It was simply there, like time itself. Noah leaned against the wall and closed his eyes. The smell of pine, the whisper of leaves, and the slow heartbeat of the forest surrounded him. He whispered softly, not to anyone in particular, but to the memory of his grandmother. I am here now. I hope that means something. Rex settled near his feet, his head resting on his paws. The rhythm of the dog's breathing steadied Noah's own. For the first time in years, his mind did not race forward or back. It lingered. Night began to fall gently, not sudden, but gradual. The forest darkened into soft shapes, and the sky turned the color of faded steel. Noah lit a small lantern and set it near the window. The glow filled the room with a fragile warmth. He watched it flicker against the walls and thought again of Eleanor's letter. There had been no instructions, only the transfer of ownership. No explanations. But the silence itself felt intentional, like a message waiting for him to listen. He reached for his notebook and wrote a few words. Nothing poetic, nothing profound, just a note to himself. Remember why you came back." Then he closed the book and placed it on the table. As the lantern dimmed, the forest settled into its nighttime rhythm. Crickets began their soft chorus, and somewhere far off, an owl called once, before fading into distance. Noah lay down on the old cot near the wall, his body heavy with the weight of travel, but his thoughts strangely calm. Rex lifted his head once, looked toward the window, as if watching for something beyond the dark, then lowered it again and sighed. The forest outside whispered softly, neither welcoming nor warning, simply existing as it always had. And in that quiet, Noah drifted toward sleep, the faint hum of maple woods blending with his breath. Somewhere beyond the trees, unseen but constant, the memory of Eleanor lingered, and the house she had built waited patiently for what was yet to come. The morning air in Maple Woods was cool and calm. The forest stood silent beneath a pale sky, neither warm nor cold, only steady in its quiet. A faint scent of pine drifted through the branches, mixing with the smell of old wood and dust rising from the treehouse above. Noah Turner knelt on the wooden floor of the treehouse, sleeves rolled to his elbows, wiping sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. Sunlight slipped through the gaps between boards, drawing thin golden lines across the floor. Dust floated lazily in the light, dancing whenever he moved. The place had been abandoned for too long. Every board creaked, every nail carried a memory. Rex lay near the doorway, his large frame half in the shade. The dog's coat gleamed softly where the light touched it, the blend of black and tan catching a faint warmth. His ears twitched to every sound, alert even in rest. The rhythm of Noah's sweeping had almost lulled him into calm when he suddenly raised his head, nostrils flaring. Noah noticed it immediately. He paused, broom midair, eyes shifting toward Rex. The dog stood, hackles slightly raised, head turning toward the far corner of the room where the floorboards darkened with age. Rex let out a low growl, deep and restrained, more warning than threat. Noah set the broom aside and approached slowly. Years of training had carved a reflex into him, the kind of alertness that made silence feel louder than noise. His steps were steady, but his pulse quickened. He crouched beside Rex, eyes scanning the boards. The wood there looked different, darker and slightly raised along one edge. He pressed his palm against it. It gave a faint hollow sound. Rex's body stiffened. The dog sniffed again and let out another quiet growl. Noah reached for his pocket knife and used the blade to wedge under the board. It resisted at first, the old nails holding firm, but with a little force, the plank lifted. A gust of musty air escaped from the narrow space beneath, heavy with the scent of earth and time. Inside, half buried in dust and cobwebs, was a small box. It was covered in patches of moss and thin streaks of green that had grown through cracks in the wood. Noah hesitated before picking it up, brushing the top with his sleeve. The box was lighter than he expected, its hinges rusted but intact. Rex sniffed the air again, his tail low but still, as if waiting for what would come next. Noah carried the box to the window where the light was stronger. The latch broke easily when he pried it open. Inside lay a folded piece of yellowed paper and an old iron key. The metal was dark with age, its surface rough but unbroken. The key was large, heavy, and handmade, the kind used for old locks that no one used anymore. He unfolded the paper carefully. The handwriting was unmistakable. It belonged to Eleanor Turner, his grandmother. Her script was steady, graceful. written in blue ink that had faded with time. The note was short, only one line. Whoever keeps the light burning in the forest will understand why I chose silence. Noah read the words twice, his brow furrowing. The sentence felt like something between a riddle and a confession. He turned the paper over, searching for more, but there was nothing else. The back was blank. He leaned back against the wall, holding the key in his palm. Its cold weight pressed into his skin. His grandmother had always spoken in ways that sounded simple but carried meaning buried underneath. As a child, he had thought her quietness came from old age. Now he wondered if it had come from knowing too much. He stared at the floor where the box had been hidden. How long had it been there? Did she leave it for him or for anyone who found it? And what did she mean by the light? Rex walked to him and sat close, resting his head against Noah's leg. The dog's warmth pulled him back from the swirl of thought. Noah smiled faintly, running his hand along Rex's neck. "You always sense things before I do, don't you?" His voice was low, almost a whisper, more habit than conversation. He placed the note back inside the box and closed the lid. He turned the key in his hand again, tracing the rough metal grooves with his thumb. It was strange, the way the key looked as though it still belonged to something waiting to be unlocked. Rex's ears flicked again. The dog had moved closer to the small window that faced east, where the forest thickened and the path disappeared into deeper shade. He stared into the distance, nose twitching, as if picking up a scent Noah could not. Noah followed his gaze. Outside, the forest seemed unchanged, quiet and soft under the gray sky. Yet something in that stillness made his chest tighten. The woods had a presence, not threatening, not welcoming, just aware. He took a slow breath, feeling the rhythm of the forest settle into him. He glanced again at the box, then at the spot on the floor where it had been hidden. His grandmother had always taught him that nothing in the woods stayed buried forever. He wondered now if she had meant it literally. The air grew cooler as afternoon slipped toward evening. Noah stood and opened the small window wider. The breeze carried the smell of wet bark and distant water. The forest never sounded empty. Even in quiet there was life everywhere, the rustle of wings, the crack of a twig, the steady breath of wind moving through trees. Rex walked to the door, paws silent on the wood. He looked back once, then stepped onto the small porch outside, nose lifted. Noah followed, the iron key still in his hand. From this height, he could see deeper into Maple Woods. The horizon faded into layers of green and gray, endless and ancient. He thought about the years he had spent running from places that reminded him of loss. This forest, however, held a different kind of silence, not empty, but alive, full of things unsaid. The note felt like an invitation, or maybe a warning. Rex sniffed again, moving toward the steps, then paused, his ears turning toward the deeper woods to the east. His tail stiffened, body tense but not fearful. Noah watched him carefully. The dog's instincts had saved his life before. He had learned to trust them without question. "You hear something, boy." Noah's tone was soft. Rex gave a short huff, low and certain, then turned his head toward the darker part of the forest. Noah stood for a while longer, the breeze brushing against his face. The weight of the key grew heavier in his pocket, pressing against him like a reminder. He finally stepped back inside, setting the box on the old desk in the corner. The wood groaned slightly under its weight. As he looked around the room, something shifted in him. The treehouse no longer felt just like a memory of childhood. It felt like a beginning, a place that was asking him to look deeper. He sat on the edge of the cot, elbows resting on his knees, and stared at the small flame of his lantern. His grandmother's words repeated quietly in his mind. Whoever keeps the light burning in the forest will understand why I chose silence. What did she keep hidden here? And what light did she mean? Outside, Rex remained near the stairs, gaze fixed toward the edge of the woods. His tail moved once, slow and deliberate, as though he knew the forest was speaking in a language only he could hear. Noah leaned back and closed his eyes. He had returned seeking peace, but what he found instead was a whisper of something larger, a promise, or a secret. He felt the faint vibration of the forest floor beneath him, the sound of roots stretching through the earth like an old pulse. The night crept in without rain, without wind, without thunder. Only the steady hum of maple woods filled the silence. Rex did not move from his post, still watching the far end of the forest. Noah opened his eyes one last time before sleep and saw the faint flicker of lantern light dancing on the ceiling. The shadows moved like words unspoken, soft and patient. He whispered under his breath, almost to himself, "I will keep the light burning." Outside, unseen beyond the trees, the forest seemed to listen. The afternoon in Maple Woods was neither bright nor dark, a calm stillness resting between hours. The trees stood close together, their branches heavy with green, and the faint wind carried the scent of earth and fallen leaves. No rain, no sun, only the quiet pulse of the forest that seemed to breathe with its own rhythm. Noah Turner walked slowly through the undergrowth, his boots pressing softly into damp soil. Rex moved ahead of him, the German shepherd's fur blending almost perfectly with the shadows and light of the forest floor. The dog's nose was close to the ground, tail stiff with purpose. Noah followed, trusting Rex's instincts more than his own. The discovery of the key and the note had kept Noah awake the previous night. He had turned the words over in his head again and again. Whoever keeps the light burning in the forest will understand why I chose silence. The phrase clung to him like fog. He had searched for meaning and found only questions. This morning, when Rex began pacing near the treehouse door and then barked toward the deeper woods, Noah knew he had to follow. He moved carefully, one hand brushing the rough bark of trees as he passed. The woods were familiar but dense, and every path seemed to shift with the light. He had walked these trails as a boy, chasing birds or listening for Eleanor's call when supper was ready. Now they felt different, like walking through the pages of a story half erased. Rex stopped suddenly near a thicket of vines and ivy that had grown wild over an old structure. The dog gave a short bark, then looked back at Noah, ears forward, body tense. Noah pushed aside a curtain of green and froze. Beneath the layers of creeping vines stood a small wooden cabin. Its roof sagged in the middle, and moss spread like paint across the door. One of the windows was broken, a spider web of cracks glinting faintly in the gray light. For a moment, Noah simply stood there, listening. The air felt thicker around the place, as if the forest itself had been holding its breath. He stepped closer and reached for the rusted handle. The door resisted at first, then gave with a groan. Dust and stale air spilled out. Inside, the cabin was dim and narrow, with a single room. A broken chair lay near the wall, and a wooden table sat under the window. On it rested a stack of papers browned with age, corners curled, ink faded. Noah brushed away a layer of dust and looked around. Cobwebs clung to the ceiling beams. The air smelled faintly of paper and cedar. Rex sniffed the floor near the doorway, his paws leaving faint prints in the dust. He sneezed once and looked up at Noah, his eyes watchful. Noah gave him a nod, as if they shared an unspoken understanding. He turned one of the papers over and saw it was an old newspaper. The headline was dated decades ago, around the time his grandmother would have been his age. The words told of a factory closing and workers left without pay. He flipped through the pile and found more articles, all with the same tone, all speaking of hardship and protest. Beside the stack lay a folded map. The edges were soft and torn, but one symbol stood out clearly, drawn in dark ink, a small triangle near the spot where his treehouse stood. Noah leaned closer, tracing the mark with his fingertip. His pulse quickened. He remembered the stories Eleanor used to tell about the people of Maple Hollow. Men who had worked themselves to exhaustion when the town's sawmill shut down. Families who lost everything. She had been one of the few who helped them, offering food and shelter when the town turned its back. This cabin must have been where she met them, where she kept her records and plans. Noah's throat tightened. He could almost imagine her sitting here, that small, determined woman with silver hair and tired hands, writing letters by lamplight, trying to save what little she could for people no one else remembered. Rex padded toward the back of the cabin, tail low. He sniffed near the wall, then stopped, his body suddenly stiff. Noah followed, careful to step where the floor looked solid. He saw it too, a footprint in the dust, large and recent, the outline sharp and undisturbed by time. Someone had been here. A chill crawled up his spine. He crouched, studying the mark. It was deep, made by a boot larger than his own, the kind used for hiking or field work. The edges were still clean, which meant it had been made within days. He straightened and scanned the room again, this time with the cautious eyes of a soldier. Every corner seemed to darken. He could feel his senses shift. The quiet awareness that used to keep him alive overseas now rising in him again. Rex stood beside him, ears erect, a low rumble in his chest. Noah placed a hand on the dog's neck, steadying him. It was unlikely anyone was still nearby, but instinct warned him to stay alert. Whoever had come here had a reason. Maybe they knew about the cabin. Maybe they were searching for the same thing he was. He looked back at the papers, the map, the faint marks on the table. This place was not abandoned by accident. It had been used, maybe even guarded. Noah took one more careful look around before stepping outside. The forest light felt brighter after the dim air of the cabin. He inhaled deeply, letting the smell of pine steady him. Rex followed, pausing once to glance back at the doorway. Noah ran his hand through his hair and looked at the sky. The stillness of the day pressed against him. Somewhere in this forest, there were answers buried deeper than time could hide. He thought again of the key, the note, the words about keeping the light burning. He crouched beside Rex, rubbing the dog's ear gently. "You found it, boy. Good job." The dog wagged his tail once, then looked back toward the cabin, as if expecting someone to emerge. Noah felt the weight of unseen eyes. It was not paranoia, but instinct, that strange sixth sense learned in war and never unlearned. He scanned the tree line, but saw only the soft motion of leaves. Still, the thought stayed with him as he began the walk back. Each step stirred old memories. His grandmother had always warned him that silence could protect or destroy, depending on who kept it. He wondered now which kind of silence she had chosen. As they reached the clearing, the treehouse came into view again, standing firm and weathered. Noah glanced once more over his shoulder toward the path they had come from. The forest looked calm, undisturbed, yet deep in his mind, the image of the footprint remained. He climbed the steps to the porch, Rex close behind. The forest around them was quiet again, but not empty. It was the kind of silence that carried weight, like breath before a confession. Inside, Noah laid the map on the table beside the small iron key. The two objects seemed to belong together. The triangle drawn on the map pointed directly to where he was standing, as if his grandmother had wanted him to find this connection. He leaned back in the chair, eyes unfocused, trying to piece it all together. The cabin, the footprints, the articles about the factory. There was something larger at play, something that had outlasted Eleanor's lifetime and had now found its way to his. Rex lay at his feet, eyes half closed, but still alert, the way soldiers rest when the battle has only paused. The last light of day slipped through the window, painting the room in shades of amber and gray. Noah sat quietly, lost between memory and realization, and felt the forest hold its breath once more. Somewhere out there, he knew, someone else was moving through the trees. The forgotten cabin had woken something old, and now the woods no longer felt the same. The afternoon in Maple Woods was still and gray. The air carried the faint scent of pine resin and dry bark. No sun pierced the canopy, yet the forest seemed gently alive, its silence steady and listening. Noah Turner knelt on the small porch of the treehouse, hammer in hand, the sound of each nail echoing softly through the branches. The wooden railing had begun to rot in places, and he had promised himself to repair it before the structure gave way. His shirt clung lightly to his back from the steady rhythm of work, and sweat had gathered along his hairline. Rex lay at the edge of the platform, head resting between his paws, eyes tracking every movement in the woods below. Every now and then, his ears twitched, but he remained calm. Noah trusted that calmness more than his own sense of peace. When Rex went silent, the forest usually did too. For the past 2 days, Noah's thoughts had been tangled. The map from the forgotten cabin lay on the desk inside. The triangle mark still burned into his mind. He had studied it every night, tracing the ink lines that connected trails and unmarked paths. Each time, he felt more certain that his grandmother had known more about this land than anyone else alive. The sound of a branch cracking broke the rhythm. It came from the lower slope near the tree line. Rex's head shot up instantly, ears erect. His growl was low, but steady, not yet aggressive, only warning. Noah set the hammer down and stood, wiping his hands on his jeans. At first he saw nothing. Then between the birch trunks, movement. A man stepped out from the shadows, his dark suit strangely out of place among the trees. He moved carefully, not like a hiker, but like someone trying not to dirty his shoes. His hair was slicked back, and even from a distance Noah could see the gleam of polished leather and the square outline of a briefcase. The man raised a hand in greeting as he approached, his expression polite, almost rehearsed. Noah's instincts sharpened instantly. Years in the field had taught him to read posture before words. The stranger's shoulders were too tight for friendliness. He waited at the edge of the clearing, voice carrying upward, with practiced smoothness. "Afternoon, Mr. Turner. My name is Victor Haynes. I represent Pinewood Development Group. I believe you own this section of Maple Woods." Rex's bark cut through the air like thunder. He stood, fur bristling, a protective wall between Noah and the man below. The stranger froze, though his smile didn't waver. Noah studied him carefully. Victor Haynes looked to be in his early 40s, tall, clean-shaven, with sharp features that gave the impression of a man used to winning arguments. His gray eyes were cold, analytical, and his hands were too still. He wore a black vest and a white shirt beneath, perfectly pressed, and a silver watch glinted at his wrist. There was something about him that did not belong to this place. "What brings you out here, Mr. Haynes?" Noah's tone was calm but guarded. Haynes's voice carried a rhythm polished by negotiation. "We're looking to acquire land in this area for a resort project. Your property sits right in the center of our proposed development zone. It would mean great value for you and growth for this region." Noah leaned on the railing, the sunlight catching the dust on his hands. "Growth for who?" The man's smile held. "For everyone, Mr. Turner. Employment, business, tourism. You must know the woods aren't what they used to be. Times change. People move on." Noah's eyes narrowed slightly. His grandmother's words echoed in his memory. "These woods don't need saving, only respect." He kept his voice steady. "The land isn't for sale." Haynes tilted his head slightly, the faintest edge in his polite expression. "You might reconsider if you knew the numbers." Rex barked again, a single sharp sound that made the man take half a step back. Haynes's smile faltered for just a second. He recovered quickly, smoothing his jacket. "I see." "Well, think it over," he said. "Our office will be in town for a few weeks." He reached into his pocket and held up a card, but Noah didn't move to take it. "You can leave it by the gate," Noah said evenly. The man hesitated, then nodded, placing the card on a fallen branch before turning toward the trail. His voice floated back lightly. "Beautiful place you've got here. Shame if it goes to waste." Noah watched him disappear among the trees, the sound of his polished shoes fading into silence. Rex stayed tense, eyes fixed on the direction the man had gone. When the forest settled again, Noah exhaled slowly. The calm returned, but not the same kind as before. He picked up the hammer again, but found he couldn't focus. His hands itched with unease. He had no reason to trust Haynes, and yet something about the encounter stirred old instincts. The tone in the man's voice, too smooth, too certain, reminded him of briefings before missions, when the truth was always shorter than the plan. He crouched beside Rex, running a hand along the dog's back. "Good boy. You did right." The dog's muscles softened beneath his touch, but his eyes remained fixed on the forest. That night, Noah could not sleep. Every sound outside drew his attention: the crackle of branches, the faint whistle of wind against bark. He rose, took the lantern, and stepped outside. The air was cool, the forest breathing its usual rhythm. But the feeling of being watched lingered. He turned his light toward the distant line of trees where Haynes had appeared. Nothing moved, yet the hair on his neck prickled, the kind of warning that came without proof. He scanned the slope again before heading back inside. The next morning, while coffee simmered over the small stove, Rex began pacing near the window. Noah followed his gaze. Across the clearing, the glint of something metallic flashed near a fallen log. He frowned, walked outside, and crossed the clearing. At first, he thought it was just a shard of glass catching light, but when he crouched down, his stomach tightened. Hidden between the bark and moss was a small camera lens, barely the size of a coin. It was wired to a small black device buried under leaves. Someone had been watching. Noah's breath slowed, his mind shifting into that old disciplined calm. He detached the camera carefully, inspecting the casing. No markings, no serial code. He followed the wire for a few inches before it disappeared into the ground. Whoever placed it knew how to hide their trail. He turned toward the direction the wire ran, straight toward the ridge where Haynes had stood the day before. Rex barked sharply behind him, as if echoing his thoughts. Noah picked up the device, slipped it into his pocket, and stood there for a long moment, scanning the tree line. The quiet of the forest felt different now, not peaceful, watched. Back in the treehouse, he set the camera on the table next to the map and the key. The pieces were beginning to fit, but not in a way he liked. His grandmother had refused to sell this land, even when times were hard. He now understood why. Someone had always been waiting for a chance to take it. Rex moved restlessly by the window, nose pressed to the air. Noah joined him, eyes narrowing toward the deeper woods. If they were watching, it meant the past was not buried. And if Eleanor had left secrets behind, then she must have known they would come looking. Noah reached for his jacket, his movements deliberate. He had survived worse than shadows. He would find out who was behind this and why his grandmother had chosen silence. The forest outside swayed softly, branches whispering against one another, like old voices warning him to be careful. Rex pressed against his leg, steady and alert. Noah looked down at him, voice low but certain. "We'll handle this, boy. Together." The forest gave no answer, only the soft echo of wind through the leaves. But Noah could feel it. The woods were no longer keeping secrets. They were revealing them. The night was still in Maple Woods. No wind, no rain, no sound except the low hum of crickets beneath the trees. Inside the old treehouse, the air felt thick and unmoving, as if the forest itself were holding its breath. Noah Turner sat by the window, the lantern flickering beside him. He had been reading his grandmother's letters again, searching for meaning where none seemed clear. Outside, the moonlight had dimmed behind slow-moving clouds, and the forest fell into a gray quiet. Then, without warning, the small electric lamp on the table blinked once and went dark. The silence that followed was heavier than before. Noah waited a moment, then checked the old fuse box near the wall. The power line that fed through the house from the main grid had finally given out. He sighed softly, half frustrated, half resigned. For a man who had once slept through artillery fire, a blackout should have meant nothing. Yet here, in this quiet forest, it made his heart beat a little faster. He searched the shelves until he found the old oil lamp his grandmother had kept. Its brass frame was tarnished, the glass chimney clouded with dust. He remembered her hands lighting it when he was a child, her voice saying softly that light was a promise against fear. He filled the lamp with oil, struck a match, and watched the flame bloom to life. A warm glow spread through the room, soft but steady. The light danced across the wooden walls, revealing lines and cracks he had never noticed before. Rex lifted his head from where he had been sleeping, ears tilting toward the sound of the flame. The German shepherd's eyes glowed gold in the dim light, calm yet alert. Noah smiled faintly, running a hand over his head. It was just the lamp, nothing to worry about. But as the light grew stronger, something shifted. The walls caught the glow in strange patterns. There, faint but visible, were dark streaks running along the wood. Noah leaned closer. They were not random marks, but symbols, thin, deliberate lines drawn with charcoal or soot. He traced them with his fingertips, the texture rough under his skin. Each symbol pointed in the same direction, a series of small arrows etched toward the eastern side of the forest. Noah straightened slowly. Eleanor's voice echoed faintly in his memory. Whoever keeps the light burning in the forest will understand why I chose silence. He looked at the lamp again, at the way its glow had uncovered what darkness had hidden. Perhaps she had meant this light. He took his jacket, slung his flashlight over his shoulder, and motioned for Rex to follow. The dog stood immediately, tail stiff, waiting at the door. Outside, the forest seemed even quieter than before. Noah turned the lamp down to a small flame, carrying it carefully as he climbed down the ladder. The light swayed gently in his hand, cutting soft circles into the dark. They followed the direction of the arrows. Rex led the way, nose close to the ground, every step measured and cautious. The forest canopy pressed close overhead, blotting out most of the sky. Every sound, an owl's cry or the rustle of branches, seemed amplified. Noah's boots sank slightly into the damp soil, and he felt each heartbeat echo through his body. They walked until the faint trail ended near a wide clearing, where an enormous oak tree rose above the others. Its trunk was thick, ancient, and twisted, roots spreading like veins across the ground. Noah lifted the lamp higher. Something gleamed at the base of the tree, a small patch of metal half buried under the moss. He knelt down and brushed away the dirt. A latch, old and rusted, embedded into a wooden panel that blended perfectly with the earth around it. Rex sniffed the air, then gave a low, uneasy growl. Noah reached into his pocket and pulled out the iron key he had found days earlier. He turned it over in his hand, the metal cold against his skin. The key fit perfectly into the lock. When he twisted it, the sound was soft but final, as if something that had waited a long time had just been released. He lifted the panel carefully. Beneath it was a narrow staircase leading into darkness. The smell of old wood and earth rose up like a memory of years gone. He lowered the lamp first, then descended slowly, one step at a time. Rex followed behind him, each movement silent but tense. At the bottom, the passage opened into a small chamber. The walls were lined with wooden shelves, and on them rested several old boxes and metal containers. Noah set the lamp on the ground, its glow spilling across the space. There was no gold, no treasure, only papers, folders, and a single tape recorder covered in dust. He brushed the dirt from the nearest box. Inside were documents stamped with official seals, land contracts, inspection reports, and letters written decades ago. The names on them were familiar. He recognized the logo of a company long since vanished, one that had been mentioned in the old newspaper articles he found in the cabin, the Pinewood Group, or what it used to be before changing names. He felt a chill crawl through him. This was not random. His grandmother had kept records of everything: meetings, letters, photographs. She must have discovered what they were doing to the forest years before anyone else. He pressed the button on the tape recorder. The old machine hissed before a voice crackled through the static. It was Eleanor's voice, fragile but firm, the same tone that once told bedtime stories to him long ago. If you are hearing this, it means you found what they wanted buried. They came once, and they will come again. This land was never meant to be sold. It was meant to heal. Keep the light burning, Noah. Do not let them silence what they cannot own. The message ended with a soft click. Noah stood still, his breath caught between disbelief and grief. He closed his eyes for a moment, the warmth of the lamp flickering against his face. Now he understood. The silence of his grandmother was not fear, it was protection. She had guarded these truths alone, waiting for him to return. Rex whined softly, pressing his head against Noah's hand. Noah knelt, resting a hand on the dog's neck. "We will finish what she started, boy." His voice trembled slightly, but his resolve was clear. He gathered the papers and placed them into his backpack. Then he turned off the lamp and climbed the stairs back into the open air. Above them, the forest stood silent and immense. The moon had returned, silver light slipping through the branches, touching the treehouse in the distance. As Noah and Rex walked back toward home, the faint glow of the lamp still shone through the cracks of the old oak behind them. It burned softly, as if the forest itself remembered. The air in Maple Woods was heavy, yet still. There was no wind, no rain, and not even the faintest rustle from the trees. The forest slept under a dull sky, quiet but restless, as if waiting for something unseen to stir. Inside the treehouse, Noah Turner sat near the desk, papers from the hidden chamber spread out before him. The oil lamp flickered, throwing long shadows across the room. His eyes were tired, red at the edges from reading every page over and over again. He had found the truth, but not the peace that should have come with it. Each document told the same story of greed, of land bought and silenced, and of a woman who had stood alone against it all. His grandmother's courage humbled him, but it also filled him with unease. If they had once tried to take the forest, they would surely try again. Rex lay near the door, half asleep but alert in the way only a trained German shepherd could be. His coat shimmered softly in the lamplight, streaks of black and tan rising and falling with each slow breath. Noah glanced at him often, drawing comfort from his presence. In the war, Rex had not been a soldier's dog, but he had been Noah's shadow, the one thing that made sleepless nights bearable. Here in the woods, that loyalty had become something deeper, a quiet bond that spoke without words. Noah rubbed his face, trying to shake the tension building in his shoulders. He was used to danger that came with sound and warning, engines, shouting, the crack of gunfire. This silence, this waiting, unnerved him more. He reached for his phone and called Grace. Grace Monroe was the editor of the Maple Hollow Gazette, a small-town newspaper that had survived because she refused to let it die. She was in her late 30s, tall and lean, with sharp green eyes and chestnut hair, often tied in a loose knot. Her skin was freckled from years spent outdoors chasing stories, and her voice carried both warmth and authority. She had been one of the few who still remembered Eleanor Turner's kindness, and she had always spoken of her with quiet respect. Grace picked up on the second ring, her tone brisk but steady. "You sound like you haven't slept, Noah." "Not much reason to," he said, staring at the pile of papers. "I found something my grandmother left behind. Documents. Recordings. She was tracking a company tied to land corruption. The same people trying to buy this forest now." Grace exhaled softly on the other end. "That explains the suits sniffing around town. I've seen them asking questions about property lines." There was a short silence before she added, "You're in danger, Noah. If they know you have evidence, they won't just walk away. He looked at the lamp, its flame trembling slightly. I can handle it, Grace. I've been through worse. Maybe. But this isn't a war zone, she said quietly. It's home. Let me call Dalton. Sheriff Dalton had known the Turner family since before Noah was born. A broad man in his early 60s, he had a weathered face lined from years in uniform, gray in both beard and hair. He carried himself with the slow steadiness of someone who had seen everything a small town could throw at him. Beneath his gruff voice lay a loyalty that ran deep. Eleanor Turner had once helped his wife during hard times, and Dalton had never forgotten. Grace promised to reach him by radio if she couldn't get through by phone. Noah thanked her and hung up, but unease still gnawed at him. He checked the locks and the window latches before dimming the lamp. Rex raised his head, ears pricking. It was then Noah heard it, the faint scrape of something against wood. He froze, holding his breath. The sound came again, slow and deliberate, from outside near the ladder. Rex rose silently, muscles tight, tail stiff. Noah whispered, "Stay," and moved toward the corner where the trapdoor to the hidden cellar lay. He opened it just enough for the two of them to slip inside. They descended quietly, the narrow space below swallowing them in shadow. The air smelled of dust and earth. Above them, the boards creaked faintly under new weight. Footsteps. More than one. Noah's chest tightened as he counted them. 3, maybe 4. A man's voice whispered something he couldn't catch, followed by the metallic click of a tool against a latch. They were searching. They were in the house. Rex began to growl, a low rumble deep in his throat. Noah pressed a steadying hand against the dog's neck, whispering near his ear, "Easy, boy. Wait." The footsteps moved closer. He could hear drawers sliding open, furniture shifting. One of them muttered something impatiently. Then the unmistakable sound of metal striking wood echoed above. They were trying to break the lock on the trunk where Noah had kept the documents. The thud of boots against the floorboards grew louder, then stopped. There was silence for several seconds, then a sharp sound, the crack of a hinge giving way. The air in the cellar felt too thin. Rex's growl deepened until it was more vibration than sound. When the first splinter fell from the trapdoor above them, Noah's instincts took over. He released his hold. Rex lunged upward with a roar that shattered the silence. The dog's snarl rolled through the treehouse like thunder. There was a shout, a crash, the sound of men stumbling back, panic in their voices. The scuffle lasted only seconds before fading into the night. Noah climbed up after him, flashlight in hand. The room was empty except for overturned chairs and scattered papers. The door to the porch hung open, swinging slightly in the windless air. Outside, the forest was dark and silent once more. He called Rex softly, and the dog came to his side, breathing hard but unharmed. Noah knelt and held his collar, murmuring a few calm words until Rex's heartbeat steadied. He then reached for his phone again and dialed Grace. "They came," he said when she answered. 4 of them. They ran when Rex attacked. Grace's voice turned firm. "Stay inside. Dalton is on his way." Within the hour, lights appeared through the trees, flashlights, the red and blue pulses of patrol cars moving slowly up the old road. Sheriff Dalton arrived first, his heavy boots sounding solid on the wooden ladder. He stepped into the treehouse, eyes scanning the damage. "You all right, son?" Noah nodded. "They didn't take anything. just scared us both half to death. Dalton examined the broken hinges, his jaw tightening. I should have known they'd try something. Your grandmother warned me years ago that some men never forget what they couldn't own. He turned to one of his deputies outside. Search the perimeter. No one leaves the woods tonight. Noah watched as more officers fanned through the forest, their lights cutting through the dark like thin blades. Within minutes, they caught the first two near the ridge, trying to slip away through the undergrowth. The others were found hiding near the creek. Dalton's radio crackled with confirmation, and his voice was steady but cold. Bring them in. By midnight, the clearing below the treehouse glowed with headlights. The night remained windless, the air dense and unmoving. Noah stood beside Dalton as the handcuffed men were led away, their faces pale under the light. The sheriff looked at him and gave a small nod. It's over for now, he said quietly. The law will handle the rest. Noah looked up toward the treehouse, its windows glowing faintly from the lantern inside. He could almost feel Eleanor's presence there, calm and unyielding. He exhaled, the tightness in his chest easing for the first time all night. Rex pressed close to his leg, tail brushing softly against his jeans. Noah smiled, resting a hand on his head. Good work, partner. Above them, the forest remained still. No thunder, no wind, no rain. Only the faint metallic click of handcuffs breaking the silence of the woods. The morning came softly to Maple Woods. No storm, no rain, no sunlight piercing the canopy. Only a calm brightness that hung gently in the air. The forest breathed again after the long night, its silence not of fear, but of relief. Mist curled low around the trunks, and the leaves shimmered faintly with dew. Noah Turner stood outside the treehouse, the wooden steps creaking beneath his boots. His eyes wandered toward the eastern ridge, where the police cars had left tire marks in the damp soil. The forest was his grandmother's voice now, steady and unbroken. He felt both heavy and light, like a man standing at the border between sorrow and purpose. Inside, the table was still scattered with papers. Sheriff Dalton had spent the morning taking the last of the evidence, sealing the files in careful stacks before sending them to the courthouse. The old sheriff had left with a quiet nod, saying only one thing before he went. She would be proud of you, son. Noah sat down, resting his elbows on the table. He looked at the last photo of Eleanor Turner. She was standing beside the old oak, sunlight falling across her silver hair, the same calm smile he remembered from his childhood. The lines on her face told stories of endurance and kindness. He had once thought her silence was indifference, but now he understood. She had chosen to protect what others would not. Rex lay near his feet, eyes half closed. The dog had slept little since the night of the break-in. Noah could still see the marks of the men's boots on the ladder, faint reminders of how close they had come. He reached down and brushed his fingers over Rex's head. You did good, he murmured. You kept us both alive. The day passed slowly. Grace Monroe arrived around noon, wearing a faded blue jacket and a pair of work boots still dusted from the road. Her face looked tired but bright, the kind of exhaustion that comes after victory. She brought with her a stack of printed reports. The Gazette had run the full story that morning, complete with photos of the documents Eleanor had kept hidden for decades. Grace spread the papers out on the table. The headline read in bold letters, "Local woman saved Maple Woods from industrial waste scandal." Noah traced the lines of the title with his eyes. He felt something shift quietly inside him. For years, his life had been about surviving, moving, staying ahead of the ghosts that followed soldiers home. Now, for the first time, he felt like he was standing still for something greater. Grace leaned against the wall, her arms crossed. She watched him in silence for a moment before speaking. "You know," she said softly, "most people would have sold this land and walked away. You could have too, but you didn't." Noah smiled faintly. "It was never mine to sell," he said. "It was hers to protect. Now it's ours to keep." Grace nodded, her eyes softening. She picked up her coat. "I should get back. There's still cleanup to do at the station. But if you ever need help setting up what we talked about, you know where to find me." After she left, Noah stood for a long time in the open doorway. The forest looked endless. He remembered the laughter of the townspeople during his childhood when Eleanor opened her home to anyone who needed a meal or a job. He wanted that spirit to live again, not in memory, but in motion. That evening, as the light began to fade, he walked down to the clearing near the great oak. He carried a notebook in one hand and a small lantern in the other. Rex followed close behind, his ears twitching with each soft step. Noah knelt and wrote slowly across the first page. The Eleanor Woods Foundation. His handwriting was uneven, but the words felt right. He imagined what it could become. A place not for business, but for rebuilding. Workshops for woodworking. Shelters for veterans learning to find peace again. And training grounds for rescue dogs like Rex. A place where scars could turn into skills and silence into purpose. For hours, he sat sketching plans by lamplight. Simple structures made of reclaimed timber, winding paths that led to teaching sheds, and open spaces where the forest could still breathe. He could almost hear Eleanor's voice, patient and wise. "Keep the light burning, Noah." It was not just a wish, but a command, a legacy passed from one pair of hands to another. When he finally looked up, the forest was wrapped in twilight. The air was cool, carrying the scent of pine and soil. Rex lay beside him, chin resting on his paws, eyes half open, as if guarding both the man and the dream. Noah closed the notebook and stood. He looked back at the treehouse, its windows glowing faintly with the last light of day. He would rebuild it, not as a refuge for one man, but as a home for many. Tomorrow, he would start reaching out to the town, to veterans he knew, to anyone willing to learn or teach. For the first time in years, the future did not frighten him. He took a deep breath, letting the air fill his lungs. The forest no longer felt haunted. It felt alive again, as if Eleanor's spirit had merged with every branch and root. He placed his hand on the trunk of the oak and whispered, "We will keep your promise." Rex gave a low bark, tail wagging once as if in agreement. The sound echoed softly through the trees. Somewhere far above, an owl took flight, its wings brushing the starlit air. Noah turned toward home, lantern in hand. Behind him, the forest shimmered in the faint silver light, peaceful and unbroken. The night held no fear, no darkness he could not face. Only the quiet strength of the woods and the faint glow of a legacy reborn. Morning light drifted through Maple Woods, soft and steady. The air carried no chill and no heat, only the mild calm of a forest that had learned how to rest again. Leaves swayed gently in the breeze, whispering against one another like voices of the past. The world felt slower now, almost tender, as if time itself had decided to take a breath. It had been 1 year since that night. The old fears had faded into memory, and in their place, something better had grown. The Eleanor Woods Foundation stood quietly in the heart of the forest, built around the very treehouse that once kept secrets in its walls. Now, its windows glowed with the laughter of children and the sound of hammers shaping new dreams from old wood. Noah Turner walked up the familiar path, boots brushing through a carpet of fallen leaves. His face had changed over the year. The lines once carved by war and loss had softened. The tired shadows beneath his eyes had lifted, replaced by the calm assurance of a man who had finally found where he belonged. He still wore the same brown jacket, worn at the elbows and faded by sun, but it suited him more now, not as a reminder of struggle, but of endurance. Rex trotted beside him, tail wagging in slow rhythm, his coat gleaming under the dappled light. The German shepherd was older now, his muzzle touched with gray, but his steps were strong and his eyes alert. He stopped often to greet the children who passed by, each of them calling his name with cheerful voices. Rex had become something of a legend in Maple Woods, the brave guardian who once protected Noah and now watched over everyone who came to learn beneath the trees. Noah smiled as he reached the clearing. The old treehouse stood proudly above, surrounded by new wooden cabins that served as workshops and classrooms. He could hear the rhythmic tapping of chisels and the soft murmur of lessons being taught. A group of children sat in a semicircle around a workbench, where a man with a weathered face and prosthetic arm guided their hands over pieces of pine. That man was David Rains, a former carpenter and veteran who had joined the foundation 6 months ago. He was in his 40s, tall but slightly stooped, with short cropped blonde hair and eyes the color of riverstone. Years of hardship had not dulled his humor. He often laughed loudly, and when he did, even the birds seemed to join in. Noah had met him through a local rehabilitation program for veterans, and David had quickly become both teacher and friend. "Morning, Noah," David called, lifting his hand in greeting. "Your recruits are shaping better joints than I did my first year in service." Noah grinned. "That is because they have got a better teacher." David chuckled. "Maybe. Or maybe this place just has good magic." Noah looked around at the sunlight drifting through the leaves, the scent of cut wood and oil, the laughter of the young and old alike. If there was magic, it was not the kind written in stories. It was the quiet kind, made of second chances and hard work. Grace Monroe arrived a few minutes later, carrying a stack of donation forms and letters from local sponsors. Her hair, still chestnut brown, shimmered under the sun, and her green eyes held the same unshakable determination as the day Noah first met her. She had become a steady supporter of the foundation, helping publish articles and gathering funds to keep it alive. Today, she wore jeans and a simple shirt rolled at the sleeves, her smile bright but practical. "We raised enough to build another classroom next season," she said, setting the papers down. "And the mayor approved tax exemption for the property. You are officially part of Maple Hollow's heart now." Noah nodded slowly, the news settling warmly in his chest. He had never cared for recognition, but this felt right. It meant the forest was safe, not by silence, but by unity. As the day unfolded, Noah joined one of the workshops, guiding a small boy named Eli as he sanded a block of cedar. Eli was about 9, thin with dark curls and wide, curious eyes. His father was a veteran still undergoing treatment, and the boy spent his days here while his family recovered. Noah watched him work, careful and focused. "When you smooth the wood," he said gently, "you are helping it breathe again." Eli looked up and smiled. "Like people." "Exactly like people," Noah answered. The The words lingered longer in his mind than he expected. He looked around at the others, the men and women rebuilding their lives one small craft at a time, and he felt Eleanor's presence everywhere, in the steady hum of saws, in the laughter drifting between the trees, in the warmth that had replaced fear. By late afternoon, the work slowed. The sun leaned westward, and golden light filled the clearing. Children packed their tools, veterans exchanged handshakes, and laughter echoed through the woods. Rex climbed the treehouse steps slowly, his paws landing on each board with a familiar rhythm. At the top, he settled at the edge of the porch, resting his head on his paws, eyes half closed as the breeze brushed through his fur. Noah followed him up, carrying a mug of coffee still steaming. He sat beside Rex, letting the quiet wrap around them. Below, the foundation stood alive, proof that peace did not have to be loud to be strong. He looked toward the horizon, where the light filtered gently through the canopy, gold and green interwoven. He thought of Eleanor then, not with grief, but with gratitude. Her silence had once confused him. Now, he understood that it was not emptiness. It was patience, waiting for the right voice to carry her promise forward. And that voice had become his. He leaned back against the railing, feeling the rough wood beneath his hands. No rain, no sun, no storm. Just the perfect balance of air and earth and memory. The kind of weather that held peace inside it. He looked down at Rex, who was watching the children leaving along the forest path. The dog's ears twitched, then relaxed. Noah smiled faintly. "You still guarding her woods, old friend?" Rex thumped his tail once, eyes soft and steady. Noah turned his gaze upward. Light poured gently through the leaves, each beam moving like breath across his face. He felt no need for words, no wish for anything more. The forest was alive, and so was he. There was no treasure hidden beneath the ground, no miracle waiting in the shadows. Only loyalty, courage, and love. The quiet light that kept the forest green. As twilight settled over Maple Woods, a soft wind moved through the leaves, carrying the voices of laughter, gratitude, and quiet prayer. The forest had changed, yet it had not. It still whispered the same ancient hymn of endurance, the same rhythm of life that had guided generations before Noah Turner ever came home. The Eleanor Woods Foundation had become more than a shelter or school. It had become a living circle of hearts where strangers grew into friends and wounds found their way toward healing. Each piece of wood carved, each tree planted, each life rebuilt was a testimony that love and hope were stronger than greed and fear. Noah often stood beneath the great oak at dusk, the air around him glowing in the last light of day, and felt something sacred in that stillness. It was as if every leaf shimmered with a quiet truth that miracles do not always arrive in thunder or light. Sometimes they are born in forgiveness, in work shared between hands, in the faith that the smallest kindness can redeem the world. He no longer searched for purpose. He lived it each day, in every smile, every sound of sawdust falling like rain, every soul who learned that peace could grow where pain once lived. And through it all, the forest kept its promise, alive, green, and eternal. To those who listen to this story, may the light of Maple Woods find you where you are. May you see that miracles are not far away, but waiting in your own acts of love, in the people you help, and in the prayers you whisper. When the world feels heavy, God still walks among us, through compassion, through courage, through every small good deed that makes the darkness fade. Let us carry that light forward. Share this story if it touched your heart. Leave your thoughts below so others may feel your kindness. Subscribe for more stories of hope, courage, and faith. And may the Lord bless you, protect your home, and guide your path with the same gentle grace that keeps the forest alive.